Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Are you an artist also? A performer? Or a guitarist perhaps? Such an ability for any kind of art, whether visual or performing arts, painting, photography, design, these are not something new, but we all possess somehow an equal degree of them. According to certain psychologists, heredity plays a great role, for after all, some people are endowed from birth with certain personality traits and natural abilities to establish artistic prowess. This is the quality which psychologists name as the craftsman ability, which may be observed with some children at an earlier age. These type of people show extremely good hand and eye coordination, demonstrating great patience and skills in activities such as painting, drawing, playing a piano, composing, even flower arrangements, building models, or performing musically on the stage. And others seem to be more adept than most at noticing and recalling details of visual images. If a person is not amongst the lucky few, but with an artistic flavor, it does not mean that they are consigned to a, shall we say, wasteland. People surely can improve their visual senses through training and practice. Studies for many years have proven that individuals who have no higher intelligence, but having good manual skills and adequate levels of energy and motivation, can also learn the skills needed to develop artistic potential. There are several exercises one can think of or consider, and they would help you discover your own artistic aptitude and even your ability to perceive and to understand the way light and shadow work. Therefore, appreciating what creates the good design and composition. There are some important aspects in artistic endeavors, which are the ability to analyze visual images. Your sense of design would then reflect your ability to perceive and respond to principles of aesthetic order and to understand what kind of patterns and other arrangements of the visual kind you are interested in. As with decorations, for instance, and furnishings in a room. Imparting feelings of unity, symmetry, and balance. Relating to your designs is your skill at judging pictorial compositions. Are you able to identify and appreciate what arrangement of items in a painting or a photograph creates as an harmonious whole? What about flower arrangements? A piece of art or photography with good composition must include features that produce pleasant symmetry, emphasizing these most important elements, can lead your eyes to items of interest, stimulating your imagination, perhaps overwhelming but not overcrowded ways, and creating the feelings of space, balance, and variety. Now, let us not forget that great works are almost always born of a vivid imagination and encouraging others to express deeply felt emotions. However, an artist is expected also to call upon uncertain technical skills to produce representations of images, either accurately or in an abstract sense, as well as presenting visual concepts in an understandable manner. These include strong powers of observation and an analytical understanding of space, lighting, as well as the shadows, proportions, and perspectives. The successful artists are thus those kind who can combine analytical skills and aesthetic sense with the power of their great imagination. How can one improve one's artistic potential? To cultivate such skills, one must obviously practice variety of forms, variety of artistic expressions such as sketching or painting. But you also may need to expose your own self to as much visual material as possible. You may need to take an art appreciation course or visit galleries and museums whenever you have the right time. You can study the paintings, sculptures, and other art forms and notice those aspects you find particularly very interesting and attractive. You can also practice with your camera. Many people have today their mobile phones with a good camera built into them. You can produce photographs which are pleasing to the eye, and the pictorial compositions. You can create your own art, examining a variety of magazines and even illustrated books, taking notes, not just the pictures, but also how the pages are laid out. You may observe the architecture of buildings in your locality, in your city or town, and also the way the streets and parks are planned. When you visit people's homes, and while looking at the furnishing styles and colors they have chosen, you may note the influence those visual elements have on the overall effect of the rooms. If you love or even admire the way someone is dressed, you may try to break down his or her outfit into its component shapes and colors to find out why they work so well together. You too can discover that this one area of skill improves as you practice. For instance, if you are exposed to a rich variety of visual stimuli, as with sceneries in different countries, for instance, you may have the opportunity to develop your powers of observation. At the end, creative imagination will have a wealth of material to call upon, and some people may be born with artistic talents, while many others have the potential of developing, even improving, their aesthetic sense, which you may be interested in here. Here is a little test of your understanding of lighting and shadow. Look at the shaded surfaces of the buildings in the scenery of a city and decide whether the light is coming from the point A or point B or point C. You will soon discover where the light is coming from. This may require some knowledge of, you guessed it, perspective. Everybody may know some other people who are evidently very intelligent, but appear to be slightly out of touch with the human race. Such people show little instinctive comprehending or appreciation of the other people around them. They take no interest in what motivates those people and have little empathy for what they may be feeling. Such individuals may possess considerable talents. We don't know. And their careers come too little or simply into nothing. What these kind of people are like is most certainly very interpersonal. Intelligence and knowledge based on comprehension of humanity. Conventional accounts of intelligence, concentrating heavily on a grasp of the world of ideas, rarely pay much attention to impersonal skills. Yet people who possess above average interpersonal intelligence are often natural leaders, arbitrators, judges, barristers, solicitors, doctors, and teachers, you name it. They tend to be intensely interested in and curious about those around them, and they are often highly skilled at interpreting subtle signs that reveal people's emotional state. Some of those emotions that people feel are expressed in non-verbal ways through bodily language. In one's own relationships with friends, acquaintances, family, and understanding of the body language may be of some use in helping one to sidestep confrontations or put other people at ease. In any business, such an understanding can lead you successfully in closing a deal or act as an early warning device to alert you when it's time to back off. And when you are spending time with people who want to impress you, you certainly can use your knowledge of non-verbal language to present yourself in the most acceptable way, encouraging others at the same time to be more receptive towards you. Non-verbal tip-offs to people's thoughts and emotions come in many shapes and forms. But the most important one is the eye contact. Too much contact with strangers can be wrongly interpreted as a threat or an insult, while too little is regarded as a sign of dishonesty, shyness, or lack of interest. What we are talking about here is that how we look at people, how long we hold their gazes, and how often we look away can make a vital difference to the outcome of any encounter. Looking or staring both communicate a great deal, but what is said is often determined by how long the eye contact lasts. When the eyes of people lock, each is aware or conscious that they have the other's attention. If they remain locked for any length of time, each one of them also start having the other's interest. We also discover that by the time people reach their teenagers, most have acquired an instrument of knowledge of the acceptable looking time, and they rarely overstep this boundary unless they consciously intend to provoke a response. That is why prolonged eye contact usually occurs only in two conditions. First, when one wishes to communicate an intense interest, attraction, or love, and second, when one's intention is to be openly confrontational, hostile, and antagonistic. People usually give signs of interest and encouragement to one another in a number of different ways. You know what we are talking about. In conversation, they tend to incline their bodies and angle their heads and feet toward each other. The interested listener usually looks at the speaker more often and for a longer period than when talking to himself or herself. In both, the listener, on the other hand, often looks away from the speaker. Have you noticed this? Now, gestures also provide a reliable and often subtle guide to how people feel towards each other. Open gestures, such as the arms outstretched in a welcoming way and communicating warmth, trust, and friendliness. When talking to men, the women adopt an open gesture with arms and legs crossed. With strangers, however, they usually cross their arms and legs in a closed gesture that communicates awareness and, shall we say, sexual unavailability. When one becomes attuned to the language of the body, one may be surprised at how much one can learn about other people and their feelings about each other without asking them a single question. Therefore, one needs to increase one's skill by observing and thinking about one's friends and strangers as they interact with one another. Indeed, one can learn a lot more still by simply exchanging such thoughts and insights with a friend when they both attend a social gathering, for instance. When you are trying to persuade someone to accept your point of view, it pays to watch his or her body language closely. This shows one who is wrongly judging you while getting closer to you. Don't clasp his boss's arm for emphasis, especially when the boss is responding negatively. And what happens in this case? Obviously, he signals tension and grows impatient with a series or cluster of closed, hostile gestures he may have. Can you read body language? Question mark. If you can comprehend what body language means, you can tell a great deal about strangers simply by looking for the giveaway signs in their behavior. However, some such language is less straightforward than it may seem, and you may be fooled into making your wrong assumptions. Therefore, we need to examine each person and their way of answering the questions. What about creative thinking? That's an interesting subject. Creative thinking involves the invention of new ideas, new discoveries, and of new solutions for old problems, and search for alternatives. Creative thinking is often a mystery, even to people who are very good at it. Best known form of thinking is logical, deductive reasoning that works along the lines of, if it's the case, then why must we follow this kind of thought process? Question mark. It is described as convergent because every thought is directed toward and converges into a single correct answer. The conundrum at this level is designed to challenge your powers of convergent thinking, and it should also demonstrate that this is, when appropriate, and the best approach to problem solving. Divergent thinking, on the other hand, means generating several possible solutions to a problem instead of aiming for a single right answer. This is more in the spirit of creativity. For instance, imagine that video systems, or let's come down to earth, television sets were made obsolete by a new form of information or invention. What possible uses could you find for all those redundant TV sets? I was reading this some time ago. Some people respond to this question enthusiastically with such answers as both of them together into prefabricated walls, or even use them to make contact lenses for giants, are showing the creative power of divergent thinking. Another form of creative thinking was popularized in the 1960s by British psychologist Edward de Bono. Lateral thinking as opposed to the more usual vertical thinking. Vertical or logical thinking involves building one idea on top of the previous one, like, for instance, sticking toy bricks together. And the lateral thinking is like scattering bricks across the floor to make new and surprising patterns. So that's the difference between the two. The drawback of vertical thinking is that, having found one promising direction, it excludes all others. because it is concerned only with being right in every step of the way until it reaches its conclusion. What about divergent thinking? Divergent thinking seeks to find as many solutions as possible to a problem. Not one right answer can be found in this. One well-known test of divergent thinking asks you to name all types of people or professionals. That can be symbolized by a feather, for example. You may be familiar with writers' quilt pens. You could mention of a duet manufacturer, or you could suggest ballet dancers because of the lightness. While some of these questions or options might seem more appropriate than others, they all have a valid connection with the feather symbol. To test your creativity, try to think of them as many other examples as you can. Let's call them limitless thoughts. Your thoughts diverge when you try to solve a problem that has an indefinite number of answers, such as naming all types of people and professions that a feather could symbolize. Lateral thinking explores as many routes and directions as possible and challenges even the most universally accepted assumptions. However, most of the material produced by natural thinking may be worthless, but it always holds the possibility of arriving at a completely new, brilliantly effective solution to a problem. An excellent example of lateral thinking lies at the heart of a well-known anecdote about Christopher Columbus. I read this one too. After he had returned from America, Spanish courtier, I should say, expressed to him the opinion that anyone could have sailed west until land appeared, and his voyage appeared easier to those who had thought it impossible. In reply, Columbus said to the courtier, a problem that would appear equally simple once the answer was given. He asked the courtier to stand an egg on its end. The courtier tried and pronounced the task being impossible. Columbus then brought the egg down firmly on the table, crushing the egg at its base so that it stood upright. The courtier protested that he had thought the egg should not be damaged. Yet this never had been stated as a condition of the problem solving. Once Columbus had shown the solution to the problem, it appeared obvious to him as the result of lateral thinking due to those who have failed to use it. Unlike some other forms of intelligence, creative ability involved in divergent and lateral thinking is difficult to measure because it can rarely be reduced to a question of finding a right answer that can be scored in a test. It is certainly not the same as the mental ability measured by IQ tests. According to Bono, Many people are highly creative without having extraordinarily exceptional intellectual gifts. Research in the 1980s confirmed this view, showing that people generally regarded as creative tended to have above average IQ scores, but those with the very highest IQs were not necessarily the most creative. How creative do you think you are? Think about it. One common sense, in a way, to determine whether you could be a creative person is to think back to the problems you have faced in the past and remember the way you solved them. Life indeed presents us with ways and tricky problems. Some of them are simply practical posers, in a sense, similar as how to get a stubborn lid off a jar or how to open the locked drawer or cabinet containing important documents when you have lost the key. Did you come up with effective solutions? If so, you probably have the capacity that you can approach considerably more complex problems. Making the best of your potential creativity demands a certain attitude of the mind. People with a proven record of creativity tend to be independent and non-conforming, and they possess an internal motivation that does not depend on rewards from the outside world. They do not assume that the status quo exists for a good reason. They know there's always room for improvement. To bring out your most creative ideas, you will have to be flexible in your thinking. Allow your mind the freedom to explore even the most unlikely avenues. The best solutions can appear in the most unexpected ways. Do not automatically reject ideas that seem, at first sight, to be foreign or just ridiculous. And don't be satisfied with the most obvious answer to a problem. There may be a more fruitful solution just around the corner. I would like to say the usual words I use every time we finish an episode. Keep smiling and be very happy. We will be meeting again in here by the next episode. Thank you.